Sonic the Hedgehog 2 is, frankly, one of the greatest virtual experiences to ever grace our diseased collective culture. Shakespeare used language to create intricate, layered emotional tales that captured core aspects of the human condition. His work will be read till there's no more humanity. But even more core to the human condition is a desire to go fast. And all that fucking idiot could do is cry in iambic pentameter. Yeah, in the interest of not burying the lead, I'll just come out and say Sonic the Hedgehog 2 is probably my favorite game ever made. I have played it more than any other piece of digital entertainment. And every time I come back to it, I have nothing but immense and electric fun. This is the game that made me fall so deeply in love with the Blue Blur, and I am beyond excited to finally dissect why. Sonic's origin story is a really compelling one, and I think hearing it actually enriches the games themselves. We'll explore how Sonic 2's design environment shaped that game, but to truly understand why the sequel is such an explosive title, I think we need to play through that first stab. So I'm going to indulge myself and lay out to you the tale of the Hedgehog's genesis. Ahaha. Sega had experienced some arcade success in the 1980s, but just couldn't touch Nintendo in the home console market. Mario and his ilk held 90% of the market share at the time, and it would take a juggernaut to dethrone him. By '89, Yuji Naka was a programmer there in between projects, and he sent a memo to his boss featuring a list of games he'd like to work on. His heart was set on developing a racing game, but it was the last note that caught the attention of management. Naka wrote his desire to create an action game that could specifically stand up to Mario himself. Another major player looking for his next gig was Naoto Oshima, an artist hungry to create a character so iconic it would exceed the medium itself. He brought a proposal for such a project over to his boss, and was told the only person capable enough to program his vision would probably be Yuji Naka. Thus, the stars began to align, and the two Phantasy Star devs teamed up once more. Naka cites a major influence was his constant replays of Super Mario Bros. World 1-1, wherein he would attempt to beat the level as fast as he could. And so a major design ethos for the project was the idea of rewarding skilled players who ran through the thing again and again with blistering speed. The creative process seemed to hit a snag once Naka insisted on a simplistic one-button control scheme. It would take the introduction of Hirokazu Yasuhara to get things flowing again. Yasuhara, having his move to the US postponed by the Gulf War, joined the project. He was on board as a level designer while incorporating mechanics from Naka. The biggest of these was Naka's game-changing idea the character ought to roll into a ball to interact with the level design. Once they got the approval they needed, the team set to work, resulting in a lot of back and forth between the devs. Yasuhara designed the stages to be roller coaster rides, and a very combative yet collaborative work environment that seemed to ensue Oshima found invigorating, resulting in, after months of dynamic back and forth, the collective love that birthed Sonic the Hedgehog. Like I said, I think this story is so interesting, it's worth being told in full. We'll get to the main event, I promise. Quit salivating. First, let's hop into the man's Genesis debut and see how the team conceptualized the fastest thing alive for his inaugural run through those green hills. I don't even want to get into the Western origin story they gave the blue dude. There was some promotional comic that established a relationship between this Dr. Kentober and a super fast brown hedgehog that turned blue when he ran on the guy's treadmill. Then this idiot spilled some soda pop on a machine that blasts him with so much evil energy it merges him with the hard-boiled egg he was holding, thus transforming him into the nefarious Dr. Robotnik. Sonic apparently didn't give that much of a fuck about their friendship because he has no moral qualms about then killing his mentally ill companion. I said I didn't want to get into it, but come on. What the hell was that about? The Japanese manual is a lot cleaner in its setup, thank God. Legend has it there are these gems so powerful their energy flows through all living things. These Chaos Emeralds have always been impossible to nab though, since they only exist in dimensional rifts found on the always moving South Island. That is, until notorious troublemaker Dr. Eggman arrives on the island, prepared to excavate the whole damn place if that's what it takes to find his doomsday batteries. He builds an enormous fortress at the heart of the island, and his mechanical corruption spreads from there. Eventually, Sonic the Hedgehog catches wind of Eggman's plans. He's always put a stop to the guy's threats before, though he's in for a surprise when he gets to South Island. Eggman has turned all of Sonic's animal friends into badniks, robot slaves with sharp teeth and an even sharper desire to see the hedgehog stomped. The whole island is Sonic's enemy, it seems. The cool dude stretches at the starting line, flashing a smirk and ready to spin his way to saving his friends and put a flashy finish to Eggman's sinister machines. And so we start in Green Hill Zone, inspired by the rolling hills of California. And that's not the only American influence here. Apparently Sonic's get it done now attitude was inspired by then future President Bill Clinton. President Clinton went on to further inspire the franchise when it was revealed the staggering number of times Eggman was on the flight logs. Now, from there, you're going to get a game that certainly suffers from being a first draft, I think. Like in Green Hill Zone, for example. There's lots of moments where the speed you can achieve is suddenly cut by the level design, as you'll nail into a rock or a wall. I understand that the idea was to reward repeated run-throughs, but it can feel like you're fighting the stage to keep your speed. It's not very fluid. Later zones will have speed given to you to complete certain sections, like in Spring Yard Zone, but it doesn't really feel earned through here, and subsequent obstacles will then punish you for trying to keep that speed going. Want to roll down the slopes to avoid the spiked ball? Nope, gotta stop and time those jumps, otherwise the terrorists win. Then, of course, there are those levels where momentum just seems to be punished before anything else. Now, I don't hate Marble Zone, the second set of stages. The platforming is okay, but it is just that. Sonic is only so stimulating through this control scheme, where precision is just not really encouraged. Quickness is also not encouraged through here, lest you careen into a pit of lava. Honestly, what pissed me off more were these elevator platforms in Spring Yard. Holy fuck, you're just wading through these. Every time! These were my most hated level gimmick, discounting, of course, the goddamn water. No discussion of Sonic 1 is complete without mentioning this pit of despair. Labyrinth Zone kidnapped the pacing and, for no reason at all really, drilled screws into its kneecaps. Sonic's already stiffer control is made even more so given the dumbass can't swim, and you'll carry your momentum into hazards without much control on your part. It feels unfair, and on top of that, given the nature of the water physics, everything is agonizingly slow. Didn't react to bullshit quick enough? Well, now, not only are you getting hit, you have to spend the next minute of your life watching Sonic react to that. It feels to me that Yasuhara had yet to meld the Mario influence with what would best fit Sonic's control. I get that's probably only something I can say in retrospect, but you can really see the idea of speedrunning 1-1 being the core philosophy this level design is orbiting around. But the most fun moments come when that level design is tweaked to accommodate what makes the Hedgehog unique. Rolling down slopes and hills or blazing around a loop is physics-based exhilaration the plumber had no chance of replicating. You can only feel that here. Sonic the Hedgehog 1 is far from an awful platformer. I'd even argue it's well above average, whatever that standard means to you. A lot of that does have to do with some of the artistry that's beating at the game's heart, as nuts as that may seem to say. Well, outside of Green Hill Zone, you don't really get the same graphical flair as you saw there. But Naoto Oshima, in designing the characters, had them represent a story of their own. Sonic is cool in a very particular sense. He stands up for what he believes in, and what he came to believe in was freedom. But he doesn't have any pretensions about it. It's just what he does. Take a look at Oshima's drawings, and I think you get that sense. Baked into every facet of this character is a coolness that's actually admirable to aspire to. And you know, in the culture of the 1990s, that had to have been an immense breath of fresh air. At least in American culture, anyways, where superhero comics, for example, took the funniest lesson they could from Alan Moore and decided they were done pretending these characters aren't fascists. I like Mario fine, but that's just a character he doesn't have. What's more, the devs introduced the subtle theme of environmentalism as a neat undercurrent to your progression. Now, I don't mean to get all Marx on y'all, mostly because I've tried to read Marx and I do not understand him. It would probably help to read the English translations, but I digress. On a personal level, if I had to outline some of my beliefs and why this game resonates with them, I'd have to note that modernity is a horrifying experience and industrialization has alienated humanity from any hope of living a fulfilled existence. Not that there is such a thing, but at least back in the day you had time to process the stimulus that nightmare blob behind your eyes was feeding you. You could kill time way easier too. Modernity represents spiritual oppression and a divorce from the possibility of ever reaching to the core of life's expanse. Perhaps once humans could connect with the infinite bliss behind the superficial layers of existence. But no longer, as we have designed our lives to feed us nothing but infinite layers of superficiality. There's no fucking hope, is what I'm saying. So one of the many reasons I turn to fiction, where it's the coolest thing in the world to see a character stand against industry, and the hell it represents. Eggman is literally subjugating Sonic's friends by turning them into machines, which is what the modern world wants all of us to become in the name of maximizing profit. Sonic stands to tear all that down, and he's not busy moralizing about it. He just thinks everybody deserves to be as free as he is, and he's willing to fight for that belief because he's a hedgehog with principles. And in this global system of industry built on sacrificing principles for personal gain, of course Sonic is going to stand against all that, at his core. That may be the coolest thing about him. Okay, I'm done philosophizing. If anybody in the comments calls me an academic, I'm going to thumb out your eyes. After a run through what becomes Labyrinth Zone Act 4, because Hirokazu Yasuhara felt like being funny that day, we arrive at our final boss. After the previous act, I was not having a great time waiting on Eggman to appear in the proper tube. These balls are trivial to avoid, as are the crushers, so we end this high-speed platformer with a bit of waiting. At least we get to blow up Eggman at the end, and Sonic watches as his enemy flies off in defeat once more. He's just a little crispier now. Sonic returns to Green Hill Zone, running past his friends now freed from the doctor's control. He jumps and points to the camera before the credits roll, ending our journey through Sonic the Hedgehog. You could do a lot worse than this game, and I think it's worth it to see how the Blue Blur got his start. Again, it could just use some spit and polish for another draft, and I think we could have some genuine roller coaster rides here. Luckily, that's just what the team got. Eventually. So, before we can finally hop into Sonic 2 proper, I want to feed you just a bit of the tumultuous tale behind the fastest thing alive's second conception. Sonic the Hedgehog was a stellar financial success for Sega, which seemed to lay fertile ground for sequel potential. Right off the bat, though, there were some issues, as Yuji Naka would leave Sega Japan after the higher-ups voiced issue with the time he took to program the first game. Hirokazu Yasuhara, on the other hand, left for America to fulfill the obligations he had now that Sonic was done. Naoto Oshima would stay in Japan and carry the Hedgehog torch forward in his own way, but that's a story for another time. Enter Mark Cerny, one of the men behind the innovative arcade classic Marble Madness. Sega had hired him to spearhead a new studio for the company, the Sega Technical Institute. The main goal behind that studio was to take up-and-coming American devs and have them work with established US and Japanese designers on future titles. Cerny pulled together a crew of fresh-faced artists, among them Spyro the Dragon's editor Pappy, Craig Stitt. But one of the Japanese devs Cerny secured for STI, terrible fucking acronym by the way, was Hirokazu Yasuhara. That was actually the gig he was supposed to take before the Gulf War forced him to stay behind and kill time making the original Sonic 1. Thanks, original Bush. Your son wishes he could contribute such positive ripples to history. Once Cerny learned Naka had departed the company, he was quick to give the guy a call and offer up a job over in San Francisco. Now that he had two of the original architects behind the Blue Blur, Cerny phoned the higher-ups and was positive they would give him the green light to start work on a sequel. However, even at Sonic's inception, it seems the company that keeps him chained in the basement has always made really odd decisions on what to do with the guy. Here's a quote from Cerny himself. Quote, bizarrely, the response was, and again, I kid you not, no, it's much too soon. So we found another game to make, and in November, as we were getting started, marketing came back and said, oops, we do need that game, and we need it now. So the team lost 2 months out of an 11-month schedule. End quote. The team began with ambition, wanting to create a sprawling epic that put a fun twist on traditional themes while introducing new worlds that belong solely to Sonic. Unfortunately, despite that ambition, the reality of the time frame they were presented with forced a lot of cuts. A ton of great artistry had to get left behind, and there were some people's babies. That's not the only conflict that arose behind the scenes. The language barrier between the Japanese and American teams was one thing, but designer Tom Payne recalled some friction when it came to the work mindset. This was a 9-to-5 job for the blue-collar boys and girls from the States, but there were a few Japanese devs that were intent on working through the night. Yasuhara and artist Yasushi Yamaguchi were apparently among those who rarely went home. One of the elements that thankfully didn't get cut, however, was the addition of a new sidekick character. It was Yamaguchi who won the internal competition for the design, and this two-tailed fox became Sonic's new best friend. Naka wanted to call him Mile, but artist and animator Brenda Ross suggested the pun Miles Prower. She's also drop-dead gorgeous. Oh my god. Sega of Japan thought she was one ugly bitch though, and forced them to compromise with the nickname Tails. Development was so strained that, just a few weeks before the holiday deadline, 13 additional staff members were flown out from Japan to get this bad boy out the door. Even shit like the title screen was changed days before they had to lock in a finished build. To really illustrate how everybody was feeling back then, I'd like to quote an email sent by former STI software engineer Ken Rose. A quote that, like 90% of this information, came from Sonic Retro. They had a birthday party for Naka. Somebody had ordered a Sonic-shaped cake. When it was time to cut the cake, he took the knife in his fist and slowly pushed it straight down through Sonic's chest. I think the finished product has a reputation that precedes it. Still, we're going to go top to bottom and see just how the DNA of Sonic the Hedgehog 2 is such a compelling evolution from what came before. Ladies and gentlemen, I am so immensely excited to discuss this miracle with you. The product of conflict and unforgiving deadlines. Hearts and souls were poured into this package. And now we get to see just how far that takes it. It may have been changed 20 minutes before the game went gold, but I would still kill for this title screen. It's wonderful. The twinkle of the emblem before Sonic emerges with attitude, followed by his newfound friend joining him in a pose. Our setting, the mysterious West Side Island, scrolls in the background while an iconic theme plays beneath it all. Setup-wise, here's the skinny. One day, Sonic parked his plane, the Tornado, on the shores of the island so he could chill for a while. As he's running about, a kid named Miles notices the blazing fast hedgehog and gets inspired by his carefree coolness. This two-tailed fox had always been horrifically bullied for his birth defect, which I guess makes the nickname kinda mean in retrospect. Regardless, Tails found that he could actually use his mutation to propel himself up to Sonic speeds, and he miraculously managed to catch up to the once untouchable Blue Blur. Once he does, he notices Sonic sleeping beneath the wing of an absolutely gorgeous vehicle. It's established in the manual that Tails has always had a love and knack for machinery. You know, Tails is the kind of guy to have a special interest revolving around train engines and the like. And I respect that about him. I wish I had something to fixate on other than my own impending death. While Tails admires the Tornado, Westside Island suddenly goes up in a mushroom cloud as Dr. Eggman begins his attack. He laughs defiantly at his nemesis, telling Sonic this is where the Chaos Emeralds have been hidden, and he's going to steal them for himself and oppress the whole world in mechanical domination. He tells us we don't stand a chance against his new and ultimate weapon, the Death Egg, a moon-sized laser powered by the cosmic energy of the Chaos Emeralds. Like Sonic's gonna stand by and watch this happen. He bursts into action and is surprised to find Tails running by his side. Thus, a friendship based in speed was born, and Sonic and Tails set off together for the first time. We open in Emerald Hill, the first zone of Sonic the Hedgehog 2. The sea behind us absorbs the infinite color of the bright and open sky, where clouds gently rest atop their own wavy reflections. These hills have been painted with a thick layer of nature's most brilliant green, and flecks of pastel flowers have been spattered across this emerald canvas. The sediment has been worn into checkerboards, and the water that eroded it lightly kisses our fur as we run over swinging wooden bridges. Those same hills have also been worn into great slopes and loops, wonderful opportunities for Sonic and Tails to roll into Mach speed. What a killer opener. This place already has so much more going on than Green Hill Zone. Mostly corkscrews, but holy shit, look at me go! That looks fun. I mainly mean in the actual level design itself. Yoshihara has streamlined this ride into the roller coaster it was always meant to be. Speed is integrated flawlessly into the platforming here. We got slopes and loops galore, and they all flow into each other so seamlessly I can actually make the most of the physics now. Keeping your momentum going is ungodly satisfying, and rewarded with the way these elements have all been strung together. Emerald Hill is a blast, and unlike Green Hill Zone, I don't think it requires multiple playthroughs to feel that exhilaration. They certainly help, but these two acts are expansive enough that every route is one that requires some momentum to beat it. A major element in that feeling of blistering speed is through a new mechanic in Sonic 2, the Spin Dash. The American manual says Tails came up with this as a means of keeping up with Sonic, and he taught it to us before that Robotnik fella showed up to cause havoc. But whoever's idea it was a great one. Up there with sliced bread and euthanasia. You hold down the D-pad and mash the jump button, charging up energy to be released in a blazing forwards roll. Slopes that once had the potential to be enemies to your continued enjoyment are now a guaranteed enjoyable ride, either flowing into a loop or sending you flying to an upper path. I had the biggest fucking smile through this whole zone. This really is in some other galaxy of stellar quality than anything from Sonic 1. It helps that Tails is here now too. I've always loved the feeling of camaraderie you get just by him being around, and his sprites are adorable. I believe fictional friendships peaked here, and the only close competition was maybe Holmes and Watson. But both of them bitches be slow. We reach Eggman at the end of Act 2 now, and last time this genius was not rocking the most intelligently designed death contraptions. For all Sonic 2 has improved upon, unfortunately, the bosses weren't really one of them. Maybe this is a commentary on the pitfalls of hubris, because otherwise I think Eggman might be stupid. He's just driving at me. Ever so slowly. Bonk him 8 times and avoid him launching that drill, I guess. But whatever, it's the first boss. We'll get more into it later. A couple hits from Sonic and Tails will fry Dr. Dipshit, though he helicopters away before we can do anything lethal. With that, Sonic pops open this capsule to free his animal friends, and we're now one step closer to toppling Eggman's latest machinations of unspeakable evil. Holy shit, I feel like I need a cigarette. That was an amazing start. I don't know what maelstrom had to happen behind the scenes to concoct this beauty, but it seemed to whip up some high expectations, if nothing else. I don't know, do we think Sonic 2 can keep this momentum going? Thankfully, we've got a whole island's worth of levels to find out. Chemical Plant Zone is where we end up next, and this is probably the most iconic level out of this roundup. Though that's mostly because Sega won't stop putting it in every damn anniversary title. They really enjoy exposing Sonic to carcinogens. Our feet clang against the thick metal structures towering throughout the place, this stitchwork of iron holding industry together. Sonic and Tails must now roll across massive glass tubes that twist like arteries through this factory of goo. As we roll, we sometimes meet breaks in the veins, poison bleeding in ugly coagulations. Sonic also finds himself rocketed through pressurized tubes that send him flying through this construct of disgust, offering him and Tails a dizzying glimpse of the slimy pink poison that bubbles beneath the plant. The first thing I want to make note of here is the music. Masato Nakamura returns from the last game to once again compose the soundtrack here, and he set out to give the audience even more of what they loved about the sounds of Sonic 1. Nakamura brought his musical experience as the frontman of Japanese band Dreams Come True, and he solidifies a pretty monumental reputation in terms of video game composers to me. Sonic 1 had some great tunes, but every track here has an upbeat energy to it that's just infectious to listen to. Tracks like Chemical Plant Zone emphasize how varied the tunes end up being, and how that energy is filtered through a sound that fits the moods of these stages. What an incredible use of Genesis instruments. Chemical Plant Zone sounds more mechanical with that filtered synth, but one that carries a different kind of sound than that of Metropolis Zone. There, the vibes are much more laid back in the face of the industrial cityscape out to squish you and Tails. It all fits, and I'm going to keep coming back to this image because it happens so very infrequently. Each song in this OST had me grinning from one ear to the other. I love every piece of it. Let's also make note of the intricacy in these sprites for the foreground elements. I'll admit, I feel like Sonic 1 could look kind of flat at times. This is never once the case here, and Chemical Plant Zone is where that first really hit me. This new team of artists have taken what was just working last time and elevated it into a really compelling setting. And of course, what might be the main draw on a mechanical level, the foundation that all this artistry is transforming into a full sensory experience, is the level design and the programming. We'll get back into the former, but I did want to highlight at least how good a programmer Yuji Naka seemed to be in order to have created the code behind the physics here. Sonic rolling through a loop only feels so concretely satisfying because of the game engine Naka got the guy running in. What I want to specifically note about the level design in Chemical Plant Zone came to me after this rockin' sloped opener to Act 1. Speed is encouraged this time, yes, but the design also rides this razor-thin line between making the speed feel earned while still weighting the design in favor of allowing it. It's a little magic trick that I don't want to know the secret behind, making every section feel engaging as hell. Gone are portions that just grant you a quick moment inorganic to the rest of the level. If I gain and keep my momentum through here, I feel like that was a result of my skill. Despite things like the spin dash and the constant slopes, that feeling still resonates. And then there are moments where my skill was undoubtedly rewarded. There's a rather infamous water trap in Act 2, as Sonic will have to hop his way to the top with a limited air supply. But you can completely avoid ever having to touch that cancerous slime with some skillful platforming. You just gotta be good enough to keep that speed. That always feels amazing to pull off. What wraps every beautiful design element into a perfect little bow is the immaculate pacing. There are little platforming challenges peppered between varied set pieces. Last time there were corkscrews. Here there are franchise staple tubes and speed boosters. But every moment is just as snappy as the last. You're not spending forever watching Sonic and Tails shoot through said tubes, and those loops crank just enough exhilaration before a challenge requiring a tad more input. I'm going to compare it to Magic again because I genuinely don't understand how this balance was concocted. It just coalesces into something galvanizing. The boss of Chemical Plant is a little more involved than last time, though the addition of collapsing floors over bottomless pits is more threatening than Eggman's squirting machine. If you time your jumps right though, it once again does not take long to give this round fucker another third degree. It's actually the biggest problem with these bosses. It's way too easy to tank hits or avoid the strategy the devs designed for you by just combo bouncing and destroying Eggman in seconds. It's not a very skillful way to speed through these, and I kinda wish these bosses were tuned to be further extensions of the level design in a lot of ways. Despite getting fried, Eggman escapes yet again, flying off but leaving behind a signature capsule for Sonic and Tails to bust open. Another prison break! Look at you go, you little anarchist. Stick it to the man. Okay, we're now 2 zones in, and at the risk of having dissected the frog here, I think this lays a solid foundation for what about Sonic 2 makes it such a stellar second draft. We've got plenty of game to go though, and that means a difficulty curve that's yet to be ridden. And if they design these zones in order, chances are stacked against us ending strong. But Sonic, despite the hurdles of his birth, has defied chance at every turn thus far. Let's see if the blue blur can keep that energy up through Aquatic Ruin, our first real water level. Oh god, the horror. Something I really enjoy about Sonic the Hedgehog original is how expansive the levels felt at times. The game took a layered approach to its stage design, with an upper path usually containing more goodies as a reward for reaching it with skillful speed. Green Hill Zone was probably that design at its most effective, but even when the momentum was kneecapped just a zone later, that expansiveness was still felt. Well, Sonic 2's streamlining of design has done wonders for these level expanses. For one thing, we're still being rewarded for skillful play in Aquatic Ruin Zone, for if you platform well enough, you barely have to interact with the water below. It's an even greater feeling of accomplishment than in Chemical Plant 2, given how much of these ruins are beneath sea level. But it's not just the dopamine kick of never having to risk drowning these cartoon children. These upper routes are even more layered than before, and what's more, they all flow into each other so that any route is accessible if you have the skill to reach it. It never feels like you hit a wall or break the level design. If you have the speed to go somewhere, chances are there's a path waiting for you. Of course, another benefit of that layered design is that players of lesser skill or those on a first run are still rewarded with a blisteringly fun stage. They just get to be tantalized with the possibilities of a higher skill expression when they inevitably come back to this thing over and over. Another acceptable reason for the return visits would be to catch this scenery, which I'd say is an improvement over Labyrinth Zone. Leaves of grass cover this place as you approach the water, scarlet berries accenting the bright green of nature's little affirmations. This waterlogged culture has been worn by the ages as these eroded pillars fight motionless against time's vampiric advance. Sonic and Tails blaze past great sandstone walls of this forgotten place. They obliterate the stillness and become lost in motion, though the brick stands still and stalwart as the ocean attempts to reclaim any memory of civilization. A forever reminder that great and powerful things care not for our existence. Reaching the end of Act 2 will present us with another Eggman boss. This one was a touch more interesting, having to rely on these arrows to platform your way up to landing hits on the Doctor himself. Eggman is putting a lot of faith in those arrows, however, and not once deviates from his strategy of letting me smack his ass. Another busted capsule will lead us into our next zone, Casino Night. The vibes are immaculate through here, with these neon lights contrasted sharply against the inky black sky. A Genesis jazz plays as Sonic and Tails ricochet off bumpers in this Vegas facsimile, getting to pinball around some fun set pieces. The flowers of Emerald Hill are here, but now they scintillate in artificial colors, painted tubes of light acting as bright and gaudy parodies. The rest of the place is carved from gold, it seems, and the slopes are carpeted and adorned with more blinking showmanship. There are even some level gimmicks that had the potential to upset me, like these elevators or the moving cubes that gave me horrifying flashbacks to Springyard Zone's floating blocks from hell. And while the elevators do kind of slow things down, these blocks have been integrated so well into the level design, I can actually use them to keep my momentum going, instead of just waiting on them to move a little bit. It helps they also aren't slow as shit anymore. I believe that's the technical term. But the real notable set pieces are these giant slot machines Sonic can roll into to gamble for extra rings. I usually try to quit while I'm ahead when it comes to these, on account of me having the luck of a man under some moonlit curse. That's not a boo-hoo thing, that's just the reality. What do you want from me? I've been to rehab. Overall, Casino Night Zone has leaned a little heavier into the platforming side of things, and so it was a little less blistering. But that platforming still had just enough momentum to it that the pacing never suffers, so you're certainly not gambling your enjoyment through here. I'd say it's still a safe bet. This is the kind of clever writing that went unappreciated by my college professors. Fucking killed in rehab, though. The boss of Act 2 is a tad unruly. You gotta rely on these pinball bumpers or careful jump timing to land hits on Eggman's claw machine. He's floating around and dropping bombs on you and Tails, but once again, the arena is doing most of the work. Which is fine, but it is still just a tad unruly with the physics here. I like that Eggman gave his mobility scooter a Vegas theme, though. Hey, he finally built it. Freeing the next batch of animal friends will take us to the peaks of Westside Island's rocky cliffs for Hilltop Zone. A lot of people say it's just blue Emerald Hill, which is incorrect. Up here are pine trees. We're also cutting between thick cotton blankets wrapped around these looming sediment structures, and running through checkerboard caves thick with the boiling heat of approaching lava. Other than that, yeah, it's just blue Emerald Hill. These seesaws are more physics-based fun that are borrowed from Sonic 1's Starlight Zone, though, like every other returning gimmick, they're much better integrated into the level design here. Another returning facet from last time are these rocks that Sonic will careen into. Though here they are expertly used solely to stop you from running directly into these lethal balls at the end of those seesaws, giving you time to reposition yourself so you might safely catapult. That's so beautiful, I could cry. These geniuses have taken one of the most disappointing features of Draft 1 and recontextualized that element into something I'm actually thankful for being here. I want to be buried with this Genesis cartridge. Beyond that, Hilltop Zone still leans harder into the platforming than the pure speed. Those sections like those outrunning the encroaching magma do crank up the miles per hour just enough so that, again, the pacing remains unneutered. It just keeps producing bastard cat children by the truckload. Hilltop Zone also features my personal favorite badnik. This purple dragon, by nature of its fire-spitting programming, is forced to always have its mouth open. He looks like a dumbass, and for that I connect with him. The badniks overall are another massive improvement from Sonic 1. Those were actually one of the more vibrant parts of that game, but here they're even more so. Each zone has a unique and colorful array of mechanical enemies Sonic and Tails have to spin dash through in order to progress. It's just another element that adds a metric ton to the game's personality. Each enemy will attack in a way that's telegraphed based on their design, but of course no one of them is a pain to destroy with a simple supersonic spin attack, otherwise known as the jump. It looks like Eggman is aiming for another attempt at his Marble Zone machinery, and he's constructed this lava submarine that slowly emerges and spits fire at us. It did not last long. Mystic Cave Zone. For whatever reason, I have real distinct memories of this one. I think it comes from the sense of deja vu I got while playing it in high school, having to pause multiple runs during this exact level because my ride had shown up to take me out to some dinner with the boys. This zone has a weird nostalgic aura around it because of that, representing that intersection of time where I could enjoy the game and the carefree comforts of a young man's brotherly outings. Life really does go downhill the longer you live it. But I'm still fairly young. The rest of my existence, I imagine, will then just be confirming my worst fears. I felt there were a few more slopes through here than we got in the two zones previous, cranking the moment-to-moment speed up just a tad. There's also stage gimmicks like these collapsing wooden platforms that give you a sec to register your landing on them. That's design that still encourages the trademark skillful and speedy play with a helpful touch to accommodate Sonic's handling, and again make that speed actually feel rewarding to earn, rather than a fight. The other mechanics also happen to maintain their snappy reputation, as the flow is uninterrupted by riding these vines through the pathways they open. Though I must admit, it is a level gimmick that does not really accentuate the benefits of the Power Sneaker power-up. Nature could give a rat's ass about your increased ground speed. You're gonna watch Sonic ascend, goddammit. Eggman's machine to deal with us in these mystic caves registers as one of his more interesting ones. Once again relying on the arenas, he drops these stalactites on you that'll damage the dynamic duo on contact. You also can't just carelessly bop them a bunch, as these drills will too damage Sonic on contact, forcing more precision to destroy than most of this moron's other machinations. Or you can just tank the hit and kill him during your invincibility frames. Who's real genius now, Ivo? After freeing our friends capsuled at the bottom of this cave system, Sonic and Tails enter Oil Ocean Zone. This is the lengthiest feeling zone thus far, and it teeters closest to the edge of numbing the pace. It doesn't, but I think it can come close. The set pieces here of rocketing between checkerboarded orbs aren't as speedy or as interesting as some others, and if these rising platforms were any slower, they'd end up losing their invitation to my Christmas party. Ultimately, however, these are just nitpicks I'm throwing out for the sake of specificity. The speed gets dialed back again, but the platforming remains rewarding enough to compensate. Some of the obstacles through here are the most interesting in the entire repertoire, like this tube adorned with moving spikes. To end off this run through Operation Iraqi Freedom, we get the best Eggman boss in the game. You can still pummel the hell out of him when he peeks that submarine out of the delicious petroleum that the Bill Clinton and our hero is salivating over, but you actually have to engage with that laser-shooting snake he'll send out to harass you in between the times Eggman has to come up for air. Not my favorite zone in Sonic 2, but certainly my favorite machine I've had to dismantle from the hands of this rotund rascal. Okay, this next zone is a big one. After freeing their friends from Oil Ocean, Sonic and Tails enter the mechanical heart of Eggman's operation, the aptly named Metropolis Zone. It's a very contentious place for a lot of people, and it's got a rather infamous reputation as being the one thing that kills the otherwise immaculate pacing. Well, I for one have plenty to say. Could this be the set of stages that test a patience already thinner than Flat Stanley's anorexic cousin, anemic Arthur? We'll find out in the next chapter, because I'm a dramatic bitch who enjoys cliffhangers. Sonic and Tails find themselves in a sprawling metal sanctuary, the heart of Eggman's mechanical operations. Industry presents itself in full, agonizing detail. Gargantuan copper gears churn to manufacture the Doctor's doomsday weaponry, and suspended cubes oscillate in spiked rotations. This is an ugly place, but our heroes have each other as they roll along those steel slopes to blast past this evil processing. Their sneakers squeak as they skid to a stop, careful not to bolt into bubbling lava. They have to ride these unnatural structures past the angriest badniks Eggman has built. The duo run along iron woven into cylinders and into magnetic passages through copper tubes so electric they crackle our fur. Eggman's Metropolis is a painful stain because unchecked industry is simply dangerous to maintain. One would think that would result in this system fizzling out, but in the real world, Dr. Eggman won, and on a global scale, modernity is going to kill the world, which I really only care about because I'm going to have to live through some of that. So, Metropolis Zone. Let's start with the unequivocal positives. Firstly, I really like these giant bolts that respond to Sonic's movement. You actually have to screw or unscrew the things depending on which direction you're running. And what's more, Tails speeds this up when he's by your side. I also think these are some of the flashiest tubes in the game, and so the zone must get some points because of that. Those conveyor belts and the cubes with alternating pointy faces were also really fun additions to the platforming, requiring more precision from Sonic the closer we get to the endgame. The set piece moments I thought were really neat too, as we corkscrew through these rotating mesh cylinders in between some slopes or tight platforming. The biggest issue in Metropolis Zone is the enemy placement. Badniks like the Slicer or the Shell Cracker will throw out ranged attacks under low ceilings, the latter of which can't even be destroyed from the front. These guys will make progression an occasional annoyance, not decimating your run, but every now and again descending from the virtual realm to flick you in the eye before you can keep going. Such an issue was most prevalent in Act 3, where another major flaw in this zone reared its ugly head. There is an Act 3. Sonic 2 had dropped third acts for its zones up until this point, and while I get the idea of this beefier challenge right before our penultimate level, the stage here is still just too long for its own good. By Act 3, we're cramming too many ideas together to lengthen the level design. Routes will double back on themselves in very samey looking hallways connected by veins lined with these bumpers. And by this point it all kind of melds together in your head. I'm not even against the longer length. I think if maybe Act 3 had been chopped up and better consolidated into the first two stages to make them just a hair more lateral, Metropolis Zone might have landed better. Probably could have also done without the kamikaze starfish. But I'm just some fucking idiot, so what do I know? Eggman decided not to use the stage to his advantage in this boss fight here, and instead the egomaniac 6 orbs that look just like his fat ass that pop upon contact. If you have trouble getting to this boss, don't worry, it's one of the easier ones. One final capsule lies at the end of Metropolis Zone, and with it busted open, our new buddy Tails hops behind the wheel of the tornado to pilot us up through Sky Chase. This single act features my second favorite Badnik in the game. Don't ask me to explain why I find this turtle's face just absolutely hysterical. But I do. This is an auto-scroller I won't waste too much time on. Not that it's bad, it's a little awkward to hit enemies with this control scheme at times, but it works as a nice breather before the challenge climaxes in the next zone. And it's another gameplay moment to solidify the bond between this iconic duo, and I'm always down for that. Speaking of that final zone, Sky Chase ends with us approaching Eggman's floating battleship. Unfortunately, Tails is shot down, and Sonic is left to leap over to Wing Fortress Zone and face the challenge all on his lonesome. That may seem like a small thing, but Tails was by my side through thick and thin thus far. To be suddenly isolated through the game's toughest moments is a decent way to put me on edge right at the gate. As for how that challenge lands, Wing Fortress was quite the level climax. It's a single, lengthy act that incorporates a number of ideas in a way that feels more streamlined and earned than the maze of the Metropolis. We start hovering over a bottomless pit, hopping between floating platforms that dangle above an atmospheric drop. Once we climb further up the battleship, we encounter some of the most precise obstacles yet, which we're rewarded for completing with a quick series of slopes and some chains to ride between layers of level design. We even get a reuse of a current gimmick from Labyrinth Zone, though now without the annoying potential of drowning. So this is actually an exhilarating way to cap off this stretch of platforming. I enjoyed just about every bit of this. You never forget that you're jumping above a lethal fall. And that tension adds a lot to these tougher challenges I feel genuinely prepped for, given the prior difficulty curve. I think the enemy placement is still a little dickish here and there, but honestly, that's about it. This final proper stage ends us with a sharp bang, I think. Oop! And Eggman's using home turf advantage to cook up a boss that can really skewer your ass if you're not careful. This laser produces 3 spike platforms you must ride to be able to conk the machine when its eyelids are open. I always take an embarrassingly long time to remember to play the long game here. Just pick a platform to ride and hop to another only when your life is in danger. And if that platform happens to take you by the laser, wonderful. If not, well, these things move pretty fast, as my past lives will assure you. The ovoid egotist escapes one final time, this time launching himself in his emergency shuttle and blasting away to complete his spacefaring doomsday weapon, the Death Egg. Despite our efforts, all hope seems to drift away with the Mad Doctor himself, as Sonic can do nothing but watch Eggman race into the stars. Until the coolest player 2 in the history of fictional companions makes his return. While we were engaged in some very precarious platforming, Tails was busy repairing the tornado. What's more, the little mechanical genius souped it up with rocket science, and Sonic jumps onto the wing of what is now definitely Tails' plane to jettison into the upper atmosphere. The kid pilots us up to Eggman's rocket in a blistering chase, the wind whipping against our faces. As the tornado pushes against the horsepower of that giant space shuttle, Sonic narrowly manages to grasp onto the rocket itself, and we're forced to leave Tails behind again to face Eggman in his fully operational battle station. That takes us to the Death Egg Zone, a double-decker boss arena. You start without rings. And spoiler alert, that anxiety from a lack of life insurance will never go away up here. For those that genuinely don't know, Sonic 1 introduced the genius concept of the coin pickups you get being dropped once you're hit, and they can be recollected to maintain a certain confidence as you progressed. Eggman was smart enough not to ship any up here though. Speaking of, he has a surprise for us once we enter the Death Egg foyer. The weirdo nerd built a hulking robotic duplicate of this blue child to fuck with us up here. Meet Silver Sonic, boss number 1. As far as standalone fights go, this was certainly a highlight. He's readable enough, but also vicious in his attack patterns, giving you brief windows to lay a lethal bonk. I will complain that I think they overtuned the hitbox towards being bullshittingly tiny, as you gotta be kissing this guy for the smack to count. It's only an issue because of my ringless stature though. For the most part, here was a challenge that certainly ate a few lives, but was one that felt really rewarding to overcome by the end. Certainly the tensest stretch of gameplay yet. But that pales in comparison to Eggman's ultimate weapon. After Silver Sonic goes up in smoke, Sonic hoofs it towards this freak show in rubber pants, who somehow outruns us for a bit. Adrenaline is a hell of a thing. Eggman activates this giant effigy to his own waistline, and Sonic must now encounter the final boss, the Death Egg robot. Now, from a character design standpoint, this is unquestionably up there in terms of Sonic iconography. It's so quintessentially Eggman, building his most threatening machine yet by a country mile, but still painting it to look like a slightly larger version of him. Emphasis on slightly. This is another machine of his I have an embarrassingly long time getting the hang of, though. Again, he's imposing as all hell when he lumbers towards you, swinging spiked fists with every step. Hitting him through that requires a certain precision and rhythm you get down after a while. But let's remember that a death sends you all the way back to Silver Sonic, asking for what I think is a mean amount on one life. You assholes could have given me like 3 rings during the Eggman chase, and my time here would have been immensely more enjoyable. Whatever, it's kind of a moot point anyway, since you're more than likely playing with save states. I only save scum a little, because the nuns at the academy used to hit my hands with a ruler if I pressed F2 during a particularly difficult section of Passion of the Christ for the GameCube. They really nailed that port. Play carefully enough, and the Death Egg robot will become paraplegic, though it takes this whole space station into an explosive demise along with it, and Sonic books it at full speed, the newfound flames licking his heels as Eggman's dreams of world domination go up in a bright and fiery finale. So, before we discuss the endings proper, from here I gotta note there are 2 endings. One is locked behind your nabbing the 7 Chaos Emeralds, returning MacGuffins from last game that were given much greater significance this time around. For better and worse. To start, in Sonic 1, you can only get a shot at grabbing the 6 emeralds present there by keeping 50 rings and running into this subsequently appearing portal at the end of the stage. Here, you still need to hold on to 50 rings, but those emeralds are accessed by crossing a checkpoint now. It's still demoralizing as hell to get hit, given the limited number of rings in each stage, but at least there are multiple opportunities to grab the things now. However, it is still not that simple. The Chaos Emeralds hover in dimensional rifts, of course, and these are represented by the game's special stages. In the case of Sonic 2, we have these half-pipes laced with rings to collect and bombs to avoid, to reach a quota bestowed upon you by a stingy god. If Sonic the Hedgehog 2 has a genuine low point, I think it's these. To start, though you're given multiple shots at entering these stages, I still feel like I'm playing a different, way more stressful game trying to maximize my rings and hunt for star posts. Once you're in those stages, well, there is some fun to be had at very particular moments in very particular stages. Weaving through these bombs to follow a trail of rings, and the third one of these did put me on the edge of my seat. The pause was intentional. I'm now done with the positives. I'll keep the main problem as concise as I can. Because of the speed and perspective, you can't appropriately react to upcoming hazards or ring bundles. Between that and, by the end, an agonizingly high ring quota means an awful lot of replays. And I was at first going to ride a short defensive Tails who sticks around through these. He follows behind you and collects the rings you miss. But because he follows your inputs after a short delay, he is prone to eat shit from those bombs. You'd think that wouldn't be an issue, since the idea is he only swallows the rings outside your hitbox. Meaning he should only be a benefit, right? Well, that's what I thought, until I realized I was meeting certain ring quotas only because Tails had collected a substantial number of those rings. Thus, it was nigh impossible to meet the next, even higher quota, because I physically could not collect enough of those twirling things to meet their demands, while also making up the difference of what Tails dropped when he, again, ate shit. What did you get as a reward for collecting all 7 Chaos Emeralds? Well, since last time he got pretty much squat, the folk at STI opted to give players an actual gameplay shakeup for going out of their way here. It's actually why there are 7 now, since it doesn't count when you only have 6. This is the title to introduce Super Sonic, and he is not worth it. He's interesting in concept, as the life energy of the Chaos Emeralds electrifies Sonic's veins and turns him into a golden hedge god. It takes 50 rings to transform into Super Sonic, and that ring counter will tick down the longer you stay a lightning-fast glow stick. While your rings stay above 0, Super Sonic runs twice as fast, jumps twice as high, and is completely invincible. Save for stuff like drowning, because gods still need air. But this is why I've never really gotten the appeal of this form. Your reward for beating those 7 slogs is just never having to interact with the level design anymore. I even think he makes certain more precise sections that much more unruly, given how fast we are now. The best thing I can say about the Emerald grind is it's completely optional. Super Sonic has some really cool, attitude-filled sprites, but I'm not on board with much else about him. I never go for the emeralds when I replay this piece, because in lieu of that experience, Sonic 2 is millimeters away from being otherwise perfect. Plus, I think you get the much more satisfying ending if Sonic doesn't have a super form. Tails and all our liberated animal pals notice the stellar explosion in the sky, the Death Egg's demise sending ripples of smoke around its furnace remains. Tails, radiating a jovial confidence that time with Sonic has given the once timid and bullied Fox Boy, leaps into the tornado and takes to the skies. We cut to Sonic plummeting from the upper atmosphere. Spiraling down a drop, Wing Fortress taught me will kill him. Until Tails pilots his ride up to the falling hedgehog, and he catches us before we become a defiant crater. The kid peeks up at Sonic riding on the wing as freed flicky bluebirds accent the open and forever sky behind us. Sonic himself lets the wind glide along his face, freedom stretching before him once more. Though now with a cemented bond to keep him company as he rolls along those looping hills. Sonic and Tails went through a journey together that was conveyed in a narrative arc you got pretty much exclusively in the gameplay. It's part of what makes them the best video game pairing, because their brotherhood could only be established in a video game. Tails ends on a flashy trick, dive-bombing and flinging himself towards the camera. Sonic then leaps into another pose, with both our heroes smiling at a day saved and once-in-a-lifetime friendships forged before we fade to credits, closing the immaculate virtual journey that is Sonic the Hedgehog 2. Nothing is perfect. There's plenty of individual aspects of Sonic 2 that could be tweaked here and there to iron the little kinks bogging the experience down. But you gotta understand, that means elevating a 98 to a pure 100. And at a certain point, are we not just too greedy? The deck was stacked against this game from the start. Creative compromises and cultural divides all boiled beneath the friction of a malicious deadline. To solve this problem, the higher-ups flew in more people to only deepen that divide seconds before Sonic 2 was meant to hit store shelves. Miraculous is too soft a word to describe the artistic result that somehow followed all of that. In fact, I don't think miraculous gives the people who made the thing enough credit. It must have taken not only immense craftsmanship, but untold amounts of sacrifice to make this piece a reality. Creativity from another world mixed with the constant killing of egos, all in the name of telling Sonic's story, of making this narrative as compelling as it could possibly be. The result, of course, is a game that will forever stand as one of the greatest of the medium. That's a safe assumption, given it's held that title for some 30 years. As for me personally, I started with the follow-up as a kid, but once I landed in West Side Island, I immediately clicked with Sonic 2 just a hair more than its sequel. Yet it seemed to be an exponential leap to me. And as much of a masterpiece as Sonic 3 and K is and shall undeniably remain, it trades some of that speed for level expanse. We'll get into the specifics in that review, but I couldn't finish this out before at least mentioning the edge Sonic 2 still has for me. You become a whirlwind through here, and rolling across the slopes of Sonic's world has never ever felt more natural and exhilarating. Shakespeare remains an unmatched king in terms of his crafted use of the English language. Seriously, each line of his is like an individual emotional brushstroke that, taken in full, reads as the most moving picture painted with feeling ever possible on the printed page. So that fruity fucker's work will stand as titans in the written medium. But goddammit, Sonic the Hedgehog 2 stands as an equal contender in the virtual world. In terms of crafted video game experiences, nothing really comes close to being as whole as this piece. It's been with me longer than almost any other game. And barring a solar flare, I see no reason why I won't keep coming back to it till my dying days. In honor of this pretentious as all hell comparison, I've opted to write a sonnet in honor of the greatest game ever made. Though my balls are small, withered and gray, my doctor tells me not to be concerned. Despite the aches they send me every day, he just slaps them before a kiss adjourned. Sometimes I twist and turn at night, my balls like knives attack my sack, foregoing sleep. My best defense. I rest in psychic squalls. If my testicles had eyes, they would weep. Yet as I writhe, agony abounding, my heart turns blue as his ball emerges. Spin dashing through pain, my tears start drying. Strength now flowing as spirit resurges. Heroes of fiction inspire life to rise, but none more than Sonic, free as the skies. Take that, Bill!